Hello, everyone, and welcome to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor Titans v Rebels. I'm your host, Shannon Guss, here with some more postseason coverage, and we are in for a treat. This is such a delight for me personally that we have the executive producer of Australian Survivor, the person who is responsible for two of the best seasons I've ever seen in Global Survivor, what I'm calling the best back-to-back pair of seasons that exist in Global Survivor. It is the great executive producer, as I said, of Australian Survivor, David Forster. David, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Shannon. I don't know how I top that intro. I hope I can live up to that intro in this chat.
Well, you live up to it.
And I didn't know if you were talking about your cat either. So I was like, he's very cute in the background there.
Oh, thank you, Miss Eliza. And I've got another one right next to me here, the other side. But no, David, you live up to it in how incredible the seasons have been. And I just want to congratulate you on both Heroes versus Villains and Titans v Rebels. Like, I truly think, I was thinking about this last night talking with Mike about kind of new era US versus Australian Survivor. And I was thinking about how Australian Survivor, the scope of it has so much capacity for incredible television, but it's also so difficult because it's so extreme. And I think that we've seen the low and the high points of that in the past. But I think in your hands, this is it. This is the formula for, it has the capacity, but it's also being managed so well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that these two seasons are just, globally top tier. So I really want to congratulate you on that.
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for noticing it. Thank you for enjoying it. Like, it really genuinely warms my heart that fans who are as committed as you and your community enjoy it in the way that it's made now, because I think I always wanted to make it for the fans, but being a network TV show, it has to have broad appeal. But those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. It can have all that juiciness of the fans, because I'm a fan of Survivor, but it can also have broad appeal. And I think it's a really fine line to walk between being a GameBot season and a season with enough game that it's interesting and thrilling, but without being completely dry and intellectual. Because I think at the heart of it, and I'm just going off on it, what I love about Survivor is the humanity of it. Human people of all types and stripes that you would never spend more than 5 minutes with, Hardy maybe. But some people you want to be best friends with, some people you can't stand, some people, like the literal, it started as this microcosm of life. So we've kind of tried to return it to that, where it's like, let's put all types of people in there. Let's put Georges in there, but let's put Jerry's in there. Let's put, Kelly's in there with Frankie's. So, kinds of people would never come together. And that's half the battle, finding those people.
Yeah, I think that the capacity for story in Australian Survivor is so impressive, and there's so much opportunity there if it's managed well. And I think that you're doing that in such a phenomenal way. So can you just talk through, for the listeners who don't know, kind of being the, the man behind the curtain, what your role is as executive producer and what you're in charge of doing?
Yeah, cool. I mean, so I kind of describe it like I have an oversight on everything. But mostly the cast. So Titans, Here's the Villains was a bit different because we were casting half returnees, so they were already there. But the identifying and casting new people to play the game and the right cast. The challenges, tweaking them. We have a whole challenge team that, come up with that sort of stuff, but then tweaking, where we put what where, maybe a bit less that, maybe a bit more that, that'll be fine. Maybe we try and do that. And then just generally cast crew welfare and cast fair. So making sure that the show runs smoothly, making sure that all the departments have all the resources and the support they need to do what they need to do, managing the budget in a way that, we don't have enough money for that. So maybe we've got to spend a bit of money there. And just generally, we have an incredible team. I'm one of 100 local, international crew, and then there's many, many more Samoans. So I am very lucky that I don't have to deal with the nitty gritty of everyday stuff, but it's more overarching creative stuff. So when do we do a twist? How do we do a twist? What's the theme of this night's tribal? How do we advance the story of these people? Who's doing well, who's not doing well? And so just managing, tweaking the game as it goes along, because we I think a lot of people think that you put them out there and they're just left to their own devices and off we go. But one of the big changes I've made since I've come to BDE is before the game starts, I basically teach them how to play Survivor, because I want them to go out there with the best possible skill set. I think back in the day, the pure day, it was kind of like, yeah, just put them on and see how they go, and that's fine. That was Survivor 25 years ago, where I was like, who knows what's going to happen? Whereas I think now, particularly in the Australian context, I want players who are going to recognise, even, and not during the game, like I'm giving them all the same advice and then setting them out on the field, but like there's been a lot of chat, and I'm saying here about this year about everyone going for the right-hand man, the left-hand man, whatever. And instead of targeting Ferris or targeting Kirby, they just kind of took out Garrick and Eileen and all these people. And I would attribute that down to some advice they gave them all at the start of the season, which was identify who you can work with. Once you've worked out who you can work with, they might not be on your alliance. They might be on a completely different alliance. They might be, who knows where. But once you've worked out who you can work with, keep those people in the game. That's your best option. So that's the Ferris and Kirby story. They always knew that they could always work with each other, but they just found themselves in this situation. People that they were working with couldn't work with those people. So they kept targeting the people they couldn't work with and kept the people they could. And so that kind of advice before the game allowed for this dynamic gameplay, because mostly the first reaction, and you'll always get people who just go straight to, their jealousy or whatever gets in the way of the good gameplay. But most people, when you give them that advice, they go, oh, okay, even though she's a problem right now, I can work with her later on because I know and we vibe on this different level. And if you can do that, then the game opens up for you. You're like, okay, I might have a personal problem with the person we're heading to tribal with, and we want to get rid of her. But maybe like Kelly, maybe I don't want to keep Tobias. Maybe I actually do think I can work with Alex, even though we have this weird love-hate relationship. Like, she vibed more with Alex than she ever vibed with Tobias. So that made total sense to me. I was like, okay, well, you got rid of the person who you were never going to have a relationship to keep the person with and had some kind of relationship with, even though at that time it was pretty combative. So, yeah, I think, for me, overseeing the whole show, it's about making people play the best game they can play. And for some people, that's a loyal game. For some people, that's a physical game. For some people, that's a deceptive game. For some people, that's a, 3 steps above social game, like a Kirby and a Ferris. But if you're playing the best game you can play, then walk off the field and go, I was proud with that. And I think, and I would argue, speak to some contestants, but I would argue that most of them felt that they did that this season. I think all of them were really proud of their games, particularly the ones that went deep. People get voted out early and that's sad, but all of the ones that went deep, I think they were really proud of the game played. And I like to think that I had a hand in allowing them to maximize their game.
Yeah, I definitely think that in speaking to so many of the players postseason, the idea of like those workable relationships was a really big part of it. And I think maybe there was, some luck in circumstance that the workable relationships were between these, not necessarily Titans, but the Titans of the game. That Kirby and Ferris were like, that's my person I'm going to work with, and I'll just kind of like cut them off at the knees and every other way. And then we got them to get into finale week, and that worked out really well.
I'm going to stop you there, because I actually think being a Titan of the game is being the most workable player. Like, being someone that everyone can work with, that everyone vibes with, that everyone has a connection with, that makes you a Titan of the game. But that also makes you really valuable to everyone's game. If you're like, nope, I'm never going to work with those people, then it's like, well, then we'll just get rid of you. Standing high on a hill and dying on that hill for the loyalty of your tribe or your alliance, at times is useful and at other times is really restrictive. Just depends on how it's playing out. And I do remember, like the Eileen, the Eileen moment where she was kind of going to betray her. She was in the minority, but just before the twist and the 3-vote tribal, she was going to betray her minority. And that was her way. She saw, out of the weeds, was like, well, I'll just let my hair down. I'll work with Charles, whatever. But then I think along, slow wait before tribal, she just kind of went, hang on, that's a losing strategy anyway. So I'm just going to actually stick to my guns and then to her great luck, that tribal ended up delivering her all the power. And had she betrayed them, then she would have actually betrayed herself out of the power she then gained. So it was like, you've got to, that's why it's such a tough and beautiful game, because you've got to pick your times to be loyal and pick your times to betray. But if you are malleable and workable and people see you as an option and a number, then you will always have value in the game. And I think that's something that people need to realize before they play.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, in that like someone like Ferris and Kirby, the reason that they're being seen as someone who's able to be worked with is because they are those kind of like innovative, nuanced type of players, and that keeps them threatening but also very protected in a world where you care about those relationships. So I think that makes a lot of sense for the season, and why we ended up seeing so many of those kind of legendary players make it so far. But I know that you're a really big fan of Survivor, and we're lucky to have an EP who's such a fan of the show. So can you talk through your fandom and experience with kind of the global franchise, and how you think that informs your role as an EP?
Yeah, I mean, look, I am a fan of Survivor. I'm a fan of games as well. Like, I enjoy games, playing games. I game all the time. My hobby is poker. Like, I play a lot of games. My brain's always thinking about games. So I think that helps. But in terms of specifically Survivor, I was introduced to my partner, now husband, who's also a TV producer, way back. I didn't watch. I'm not a series oneer. Like, I don't have that memory of watching, Richard Hatch take the crown or whatever. I didn't have that. I was like, oh, they all look dirty and ugly. I don't watch that. And then, so I came to it very late. I came to it in the 20s. So 10 years in. And so a lot of the iconic seasons had already happened. All those moments had already happened. So I kind of went back and watched them as an adult or many years later. And then I kept caught up. So what I enjoyed about Survivor before I ever worked on it was that it's such a brilliant format that you couldn't really screw it up. And God knows people have tried. There's been some really dodgy US seasons, there's been some dodgy Australian seasons, and overseas as well. And then also the format is very broad, like doing Australian Survivor and meeting the castaway people and the franchise owners, and them telling us and us researching all the international seasons. And I'm not just talking the ones that we all talk about, like Australia, South Africa, like Italy, and Turkey. Like Turkish Survivor went for something like 140 days. It was like ridiculous. So the format itself is the ones we've come to know and love, which is kind of the carbon copy of the US version, I think is so brilliant in that the mechanic of the duel for the winner, for me, is the gold, because you can't just like hack your way through this cast ruthlessly and then you're standing there at the end and you get $1 million. That's not how it goes. You've got to do it carefully. You've got to do it. If you're going to be brutal, you have to be respected. There's all these kind of levels to it that I really like. But on top of that, I think the Australian season, as you mentioned in the start of this chat, has had this beautiful opportunity with its 24 episode structure and 32.5 hours of television. You can tell these incredible arcs, these character arcs that the US just doesn't have the opportunity to do. Well, certainly didn't before 45 when they went to the 90-minute format. And, the US season just became very fast to watch, fast to play, fast to feel, and you're running through it and you never get into it. Whereas I remember the moment in season 4 for us, Champions v Contenders 2, where Pia voted out Luke, and she had to because she knew he was going to win, and for her to win, he had to go. But he's a young dad with 3 kids, all with genetic illnesses, and he's a great guy and a huge legend of the game. And it was such a heartbreaking moment, and they cut it so well, and I was feeling, and I was like, that's what I want to watch. That's what I want to watch when I watch Survivor. I want to watch feeling. I want to watch feeling. I want to watch funny. I want to watch game. I want all of this. And I think that is what we've been able to do with the amount of time we have. We can build up these characters and then like mash them with the hardship that they face in the game, and then they struggle, and then they're on the bottom again, then they can climb up to the top. Sometimes they win, sometimes they don't. But a great example of that is Simon from last year. If you'd asked anyone up until 8 of Heroes vs. Villains what they thought of Simon, they would have been like, he's an idiot, he's got to go, He makes all the wrong moves. He's got no idea what's going on. And then as he stayed in the game and just found a way through, and then had the foresight to work with George on the pirate ship, to just really go beyond his initial thoughts of the game, he became so loved and so within the community because he was a good player for surviving. That is what the game is about. You can just stay in the game. And so that's what I loved about Simon. And you never would have got that in a 14-ep season because he would have been gone. And he just would have been some, muscly dude who was good at challenges and was a little bit, confident, and then he was gone. So Simon had the opportunity to grow and shine. And he was the perfect foil for George, who, George very well. I know George very well. He's a very, very good player and a very smart guy, but he could not understand Simon. He couldn't get his brain around him, and he couldn't handle the fact that Simon was still there. He was still toying with George. He just could not get rid of him. And that, dichotomy of George and Simon, was such a beautiful thing to watch. Same with Kirby and Ferris this year. You need that kind of, every hero needs a villain, every yin needs a yang. And if you want the game to last and grow, you need those relationships, because if it's just one person dominating, which George kind of did in Heroes v Villains toward the end, it gets a little like, okay, all right, we're here to watch the battle, we're here to watch the conflict, we're here to watch the triumph, and you need a quest. It can't just be like I saw a door and I opened it and I walked through it. That's the end of my story. It's got to be I tried every door in the hallway and nothing opened, and oh my God, am I ever going to find my way out of this hallway? That's what gives us the relief when it finally happens. We're like, yes. So that's what Australian Survivor can do, because we have that time in the edit, that time on the island, and I think we've just now got it right. Like after 5-8 seasons, we've finally got it right. And not to say we didn't get it right in seasons 1 through 7 at times, but I think now it's all working well. It's firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, I think that if we look at those kind of dynamics, if you look at like George and Simon, Kirby and Ferris, Mark and Caroline, those are 3 of my favorite dynamics that exist in Global Survivor. And I think it's that, again, like the scope for the arcs is incredible, but I think also telling it well has been, a real success for you, because I even look back at old seasons of Australian Survivor and a lot of those arcs are there, but sometimes not shown as well. Like, again, there is so much space. There's so much that can be done in a roller coaster of 47 to 55 days. That is, there's just a lot of space for that, but it's about kind of telling those then very nuanced stories in great ways. And I think that's obviously been done because, something like Kirby and Ferris is now like the gold standard of Survivor dynamics and relationships, which is incredible. And so the structure of Australian Survivor, I feel like it's quite difficult though. And again, I think you've done it so well, but obviously it requires something like non-eliminations. And I'm interested in the way that you approach the non-elims, because I loved it this season, 2 pre-merge non-elims, no post-merge non-elims, which really did, the momentum of the post-merge never stopped. I actually could have used a bit of a break in the end. Maybe I could have taken an episode to chill. No, it was incredible. And even in Heroes versus Villains, I thought they were done in a way that, didn't break the game in a way that made sense and still often had some stakes, but like kept the integrity of the game. So that's not always been the case for non-elims. So how do you kind of look at non-elims and how you've approached them in the last 2 years?
I think non-elims are, they're now, I've spoken about this a lot, and I think that we've kind of made them a language of our show now. I think it's difficult, and the US Survivor will say the same with their twists or with their, their advantages or whatever. Some of them work, some of them don't work. And some of them might work in a different set of circumstances, even if they didn't that second set of circumstances. We've been lucky enough in that the 2 tribal challenges we've had, namely the amazing Ep 7 last year and then Ep 10 this year, resulted in a change of the game. So it wasn't just like we did the challenge and the person we thought was going to win won, and then the same person went home that was always going to go home. So when a twist results in a change, it's equal parts satisfying and frustrating. I remember there was a last year, and you may be able to pick it out, right, when Hayley was meant to go home and she didn't go home because there was a twist. And I remember the audience just hated it. But the situation is that toward that tribal is to not have gone home, and although the story you're seeing says that she will go home, to pull the curtain back a bit, we always need drama at a tribal. We always need it to seem like there's more than one person going home. There could be this person or that person, because that's how you tell a story. Sometimes on the island, it's always going to be that person. Times on the island, it's just no way never going to be anyone but that person. And so then we as storytellers need to craft a credible alternative. It's almost like the opposition, in the government situation. It's like we need to be in a credible opposition. Like we need to make a real case as to why that person may not go, even though they're going to go. So sometimes the twists sort of spoil a plan, yes, like in that Haley situation, and sometimes they spice up, otherwise be a rather boring tribal. But the situation with the twists is, because we're a 24-episode show and we have 24 contestants, if we eliminated someone every episode, we'd have one person in the finale, and that doesn't really make it thrilling finales. So we have to have non-Olymps. The question how many we have is live, right? Because if we have someone who has a medical evacuation, which we had in the first episode last year with Jackie Asia and almost George, we've had it in 5 with Lee, who went home after his mum sadly passed away during the show. We've had Georgia in season 6 who had to be evacuated. There's a lot of things that can go wrong out there. If you lose a player, then we have to have a non-Olymp. It's just what it is. So if you ever see a medical emergency, you can expect an additional non-Olymp, because we just don't have enough. We need to lose someone. We need to have at least 2 people at the end. And that means we need at least 2 non-Olymps in a season. If someone goes home, we need 3. If someone gets evac, we need 3. If 2 people get evac, then suddenly we've got, Redemption Island or something like that. So we have all those plans in place. We'd make all those plans before the start of the season. The ifs, the whats, the maybes. We have to be, but then we also have to be rubbery on the night. Like we're not on the night. That's a term. I don't mean actually on the night. I mean in the filming of the show. Like a lot of people are like, oh, they just threw this twist in to save this person. Oh, they just threw it in. I'm like, we did not throw the tribal challenge in. Do you know how much work that's to set that up just on the other side of tribal, and then have all the cameras ready to shoot and all the lighting ready to light and everything ready? I was like, that is not just set up. I'll tell you right now. So whoever wins immunity that day, they're just lucky. It's not because, or whatever happens in that scramble, the producers don't have the power to just turn it on a dime. These things have a lot of planning that go into them. So sometimes it's really it's a happy accident that it happens when it needs to happen for the game. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the end of the game, like Charles. Like he was bobbing along quite happy, not sticking his head above the parapet, not really getting into much trouble, and then suddenly he has one try, there's a couple of wrong things, a twist happens, and he's out the door. So that is what we have to do to make the show. But I'm glad. I kind of get excited when we get to spitball ideas for what they could be. More often than not, we try not to disadvantage people too much or ruin their games or lose people because of a twist. You should have some agency in twist to navigate your way through it. Like, for example, and I know, there were lots of thoughts about the tribal challenge this year. But for me, the agency was in winning the challenge. If you want a challenge, you get your vote. And so you have to, whereas if we just said we're doing a challenge, like, and for example, in the season 8 one, it was like, Simon won immunity, now can't be voted for. Everyone else is still fair game. But so the agency needs to be there. You need to somehow find your way through it. I'm always amazed, like when we did the one, Rihanna and Alex had to draw rocks to go to the other tribe. I'm always amazed how when we do a twist, a lot of the players revert to, they become conservative in the gameplay. They're like, anyone but me, not me. No. They don't. The great game players will take opportunity. And I remember Henry in season 2 jumped to the other tribe when he didn't have to. There was like a twist at the start of the episode. It was like, who wants to switch tribes? And he's like, I'll do it. And I was like, yes, boy, take that opportunity. And I think that players have opportunity in the game, and anti what you want to do because you want to stay safe and you want to think and you want to look and you want to see how that all plays out. But the ones that take those chances really become characters because they've made an action and done something. Oh, they made an action and done something, but they move their game forward and they become big threats or they become big players. And that's essentially what every Survivor player wants to be, right? So when a twist occurs, you have an opportunity to lean into it, like Jerry and Kelly did, or you have an opportunity to lean away from it, and which will preserve you in the game, but will make you disappear in the edit. I mean, that's kind of the way I tell them, is like, when you're given an opportunity in this game, this is a pre-game chat, take it. When you find an idol, take it. When you see an opportunity to change the game, take it. Because at the end of the day, you want to be you want to be in this game. You want to be playing this game. You don't just want to be on the side. And also, if you're on the sidelines pretty much the whole game, you're going to get to the end and you'll be a goat. And in your head, you won't think you'll be a goat, because you'll be like, I've carefully all these relationships to be like, very carefully got to the end and very quietly. And then everyone on the jury will say, what did you do? You haven't played a game. And then your other legacy will be someone who's at the end done nothing. And ain't nobody who applies for the show wants that reality. So I'm segueing all over the place here. But part of my job is to also trying to talk people out of the game that they think that they're playing, and remind them of the game that they're being perceived to be playing. Because perception is reality in Survivor and in life. And if you are being perceived to be playing a nothing game, you are in fact playing a nothing game.
Well, I felt
that's,
Yeah, I was very critical of Henry, I think. I was critical of everything he did in that pre-merge, but look, that's the Henry style, and he's a legend, and he came back. I mean, look, he did kind of lose Jackie for that decision. He left his allies with no numbers, and then they were picked off. But
he did.
That's Henry.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the Henry way.
But like, the question is, like, if you're going to, and segue to casting, if you're going to apply it to Survivor, like, you've got to decide. Most people who come into these applications are like, I'm going to be the biggest player ever. I want to be the biggest player, or I want to make moves. I don't want to be a goat. But the thing is, I've got to see, and this is my job, I've got to find out what the words are saying to the truth of your character, right? Some people just relish the chance. Like George just relishes the chance. He sees something and he's like, I don't care how this is going to work out, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put it all in and I'm going to go for it. Risk takers. People who are like, I'm just going to jump. I'm just going to jump. And those are the ones who will make the move. And those are the people who will see the possibility, see that. And like, not every cast member has to be that. And there are very different many sides to that skill. It might be, I'm going to push you to make the move. And then I'm going to say, I survived and you didn't. But the cast has to be able to take those risks and take those leaps. And if you can, then you are more likely to be cast on the show. But I think everyone thinks they're going to do it, but a lot of people don't do it. And that's sad, because I don't want to watch people who are not willing to take a chance.
Yeah, so a couple of things in that, like for the non-Olims themselves, because episode 10 is not a non-Olim. That's like when we can talk about that separately.
Yeah. Correct. Yes, that's not.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of its own thing. But then the non-Olims, I feel like the way that I've seen you approach them is like quite minimized. Like, again, like I don't feel like the game has been exceptionally broken in the last 2 seasons with those non-Olims. They haven't been long term. Like in other seasons, we've seen like a week of purgatory, a week of the urns. It's like theme week, and people love that. Yeah. So I feel like, is that true? That like, am I right in that that's been the approach for the non-Olim specifically, where it's been like, and again, like to not have it post-merge, I think that reduces the impacts of the non-Olim and puts more of the agency on the players, where they're going to play an entire post-merge game that's pretty much twist-free. Like, is that the way that you are looking at it?
Ideally, yes. I don't want to have a twist. I mean, like we say this, but hey, Heroes E Villains had, the jury member vote out, which was a pretty big twist in like Ep 23 or 22. So, but I don't necessarily want to. You don't want to screw up their end game, because that is when every decision really counts. In their final 5, final 6, final 7. I actually think the juiciest part of the game is between 10 and 6, when those final alliances are kind of being set in stone, when the final real betrayals happen. Then it gets very personal after that. The Ferris Kirby idle non-play, or the Luke Pia vote out. In the 4 and 5 moment, it gets very personal, very much like, I just can't beat you, so I need to get rid of you. Whereas that when the pieces are still shuffling around the board at 10 to 6 is really interesting, and I don't want to twist any of that up. I think we like the opportunity to do them both before merge, and it was a pretty twisty week pre-merge. We had the at 10 tribal, and then we had the Alex and Rihanna thing, but it was kind of a bullet I was prepared to take there to make sure it was a pure post-merge game, than have another one post-merge. Which there was one in the gun that we could have used, but we didn't have to, so we didn't. I think being able to, and it leads me to because it's all a numbers game, right? We're talking about 24 people, 24 episodes. Where do the numbers fall? Who goes home where? Who doesn't go home where? But then the final two, welcome back to the final two, I think was a great choice as well. And I'm really into the final two, because what I think the final 3 offers you is a chance for more goats. Basically it's like more people there, more goats. But necessarily, I think we had personally, I think this is the best final 3 in Titans v Rebels we've ever had. I think, every single one of them had a claim to the throne, played an interesting game, played a different game to each other. I think if Kirby had been in that mix as well, and also Raymond, and I think, the edit kind of downplayed Raymond's game a lot, obviously, because he didn't win. But I think if Raymond had been in that final 2 or 3, I think he would have got a different edit, and you would have seen a lot of the moves that he made with Ferris, rather than attributing them to Ferris, who ended up being the winner. But Ferris did a lot of things together, and Ferris and him were a kind of a great duo in that they really tempered each other. Ferris would have all these plans, and Raymond would be like, no, that's not going to work. You can't do that, or we should do that, or she's a problem. Ferris was, Raymond was always kind of trying to push different agendas on Ferris, and Ferris was trying to push different agendas on Raymond. And they had a very complex relationship. But because Ferris ended up winning, and because they were so close, obviously a lot of that became Ferris's game, even Raymond as well. But Raymond love aside, I think that final 5, but also that final 3, were very, very strong. It didn't really matter who got to the end. I think a Mark Caroline final would have been a lot closer. I think a Mark Ferris would have been a lot closer. I think I feel sorry for Caroline that none of them awarded her their vote, because I think they played a game worthy of votes, particularly from her allies. But I think in the end, a final 2 is a much more difficult choice than a final 3, because I think and you and I have never played the game, but I think if we did and we were sitting on that jury, we'd look at a final 3 and we would just immediately count one person. We'd be like, well, that's not them. So it's always going to be down to 2 anyway. So I'm kind of down with the final 2. What I struggle with is the final 3 to 2 choice. I've always found, maybe it's because I'm there and I'm seeing how obvious it is. Like, it's obvious. I'll house on who that person is going to take every time. Even in the edit, we muddy the waters a bit because we want to, and we want to provide all the options of, but I could take her, but may take him. But at the end of the day, you're always going to take the person you can beat. It's $500,000. You're not going to take the person you think. Difference is, in this year's example, was Kirby thought she could beat everyone, and she just wanted to take Ferris to the end because she knew he could beat him, and she just wanted him. Whereas Ferris, in my mind, was never going to take Kirby, ever. Even though in the edit he seemed to entertain it, and he said it post-game, like, why would I take the person who is potentially going to beat me for $500,000 in the title of Soul Survivor? Like, why? That is actually gameplay. It's actually not the way a player plays. It's too much money and too much kudos, and you've come too far in this journey to screw it up at the final. And I think that, so the final 2 is an interesting part of the game. I'm glad it's back, and I think that it provides more jeopardy than a final 3 in my mind. So hopefully we'll do it again.
Well, I love to hear that as a final twofer, which I'm making a thing. In defense of like the final 3 vote, yes, probably the most yada yada vote of the season. And I know that you guys get to the deep dives, and I'm like, okay, then you vote like Mark gets voted, like, and that does seem simple. But to be fair, like maybe 95 times out of 100, it's really simple. But those 5, when Sean takes Shane or Wu takes Tony, like or Colby takes Tina, like when you make a game losing binary decision. That's gonna be like the most fascinating stuff in
Wendell Dominic.
Well, yeah, I think that was fire. So that was more, but yeah, like
didn't the third? Yeah.
For what was?
Remember when the third girl had to cast the winning vote?
Yeah.
I can't remember her name.
Well, yeah, for Laurel, like that was amazing.
Like unbelievable. But that's so sad. That's 5 out of 100. Like, and that's hard.
Yeah. I mean, we have already had it in Australian Survivor, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. And the Shane Sean vote is a really interesting one because I didn't think Shane was going to win that season, and I was there. And I don't think anyone thought Shane was going to win that season. And let's rewind even further and to season 1, when I very famously, amidst the crew of Survivor, stood up in the middle of the tribal council in the control room about 10 episodes in when Christy Bennett was saying something strange. And I was like, imagine the winner of Australian Survivor, Christy Bennett. And we all laughed. And then fast forward 30 days later, when she did probably the greatest thing in Australian Survivor history, which is she beat 2 people who had won immunity challenges between them, I think, or 8. And then she took the mask off, became Kaiser Soze, and just revealed everything. An incredible final tribal performance I've ever seen in my life, and deservedly won the game, and good bloody honour. So I'm like, there's so much in this game that you just don't expect, and players can do that. Christy, a longtime fan as well, was just waiting for that moment her whole life. And then it happened, and she rose to the occasion like an athlete at a gold medal match, and it was amazing to watch. So, but I didn't think that. I thought there was no way she could win the game. None. And that is the view of the entire crew at that time. So we were schooled by Christy and then by Shane. So I think it's very surprising, this game, and what can happen and how it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm going to keep advocating for the final 2. Like, I feel like the final 2 allows for that kind of varied winner type and those surprise wins that are truly shocking in a way that's hard in a final 3. And I think you say that as a juror, maybe with a final 3, you just kind of rule one person out. And I think that mentality might mean you rule out 2 people. Like, once you're already kind of thinking of that, whereas if you're not ruling anyone out as much in a final 2 and you see it as this battle, I do think that it almost can be more competitive, which might seem counterintuitive, but you're like, this is a matchup versus, this person's out in front compared to 1 or 2 people. And then I think that maybe they're kind of out in front. So when you look at, and I'm so glad to hear that you're loving a final 2. I really do. I love it. But when you're looking at that, so are you, Are you looking in the future towards like that kind of maybe like kind of free 2 or 3 kind of option going forward?
Well, I think it's kind of, we'll make that call during the game, and I'd like to keep them guessing. I think it's so much of this game is about keeping the players, and Survivor it's like a living game, right? You never know what's around each corner, particularly the US version. It's like, we're going to change the whole game now. Like the whole, hourglass smash stuff. I'm like, whoa, how do you play the game? Like, how do you plan for that? So we don't do it as dramatically as that, but I think keeping them guessing on a 2 or 3 is a bit like that. But I'll just say about the final 2 as well. I think one of the great things that you don't realize until you're in it is you actually only have to beat one person. In the final 3, you need to beat 2 people and to take down that person and that person. Whereas in a final 2, it's like, all I have to do is just destroy, either big up my game, but destroy your game. That's all I have to do. I am the alternative. You have no other alternative. And if you don't like that person's game, it was with the Sean and Shane situation, it's probably more of a revenge win than anything else. If you don't like Sean's game, you got to vote for me. Sorry, I'm the only other option. And so I think that provides a much more more interesting human choice than the three, which is sort of like, well, one person I don't really care about, and then that person's clearly better than that. So I don't know. It's counterintuitive because you think more options would create more drama, but it doesn't. And so I'm a toother as well.
Amazing. I love that. I think that as well, that's when you get the shocking win. Some people like that less. Some people want, they want to make sure, like, as an example, if Ferris loses that final immunity challenge, and then it feels like, oh, we could have had this winner in Ferris, and people would have been upset about that. But I think there would have been intrigue in a Mark win, and people would have, maybe they would have been upset about Ferris, but I think it's okay to be heartbroken. I think it's also more satisfying when someone like Ferris finds a way to get to the final two, and then that's almost more cathartic because he did it, and because it doesn't happen every time, it's that much more impressive. So there's a lot there, and I think if you can have a thing where pretty much anyone can win because they can be sitting next to one person who just absolutely bombs, there's so much scope there. Like, no one is ruled out at any point in a final two for me. And okay, I love that it's a thing. I love that it exists somewhere in the world, because that's important.
But also, I do want to say, and this is a really important point, like, and this is hard to kind of understand, but the winner always gets the winner's edit, right? So as I said that stuff about Raymond and Ferris before, if Mark had beaten Ferris, taken Caroline and won, his edit would have been different. Some of the failures that he had in moves might have been less dramatic. Some of the successes might have been more bigged up. He might have played a more prominent role in moves he was a part of, but didn't get the credit for in the edit because it was Caroline's move on Viola. Like, for example, I know he wasn't involved in that move, but you know what I mean. So, like, always remember you're watching a story that already has an ending. You're not watching it live. It already has an ending, and then the amazing post team, and you heap a lot of praise on me, and thank you. I heap a lot of praise on our post team, namely our post DP Toby, who's a genius, and everyone, all of his supervising producers and all actual episode producers and the editors, they just get it, right? And so they look at the whole story and they go, all right, Ferris. So how do we make Ferris's journey interesting? But if that had been Mark wins, and it would be, how do we make Mark? In Raymond wins, it would have been like, how do we make Raymond's journey the most interesting journey? Because they're the winner. So you want to walk away from this series going, I value the winner. I value the winner's journey. So history is written by the victor, like colonialism. Hey, hello. So this is our human storytelling. This is how we tell humanity. The winners write the story. And so if you want to have the best edit, win the game. That's basically the way to do it. I mean, the US is a little different. I don't know if they use that ethos, because they've had a lot of winners who people go, hang on, how did they win? Why? And I don't want that. I want people, I get why you won. Even you can have your opinion about it. Some people will never like Ferris, or never like Liz, or never like Shane Gould, or whoever. They'll just be like, they played a dumb game and whatever. That's your opinion. But I need you to understand why they won. That's my goal as a storyteller. You need to walk away going, I get why Ferris won, because I saw all these amazing things that he did, or I saw all these things that he did, whether I view them as amazing or not. And so I see why the jury awarded him the win. I understand that. It doesn't feel surprising to me. So that has a lot to do with it. So when you think about who would have final two or final three, or if Mark won, or if Caroline won, or if Kirby won, their whole game might have been presented differently to you. We would have made that choice. So just remember that there's so much there, and there's so many ways to cut it, and you're seeing the version of the Ferris win version. Like, if you want to see the director's cut of the Mark win version, that might be a whole different game you watch.
Yeah, I think what you're describing is trust. Trust in the cast, trust in each player, trust in the storytellers to tell the story as it organically happens, rather than feeling the need to kind of shift production necessarily to make sense of or to get an outcome that you want, rather framing it around a lot of different outcomes that can be good, because you've hopefully cast well with players who can be satisfying across the board. So I think that that's a really good way of looking at it. But then kind of going back to that episode 10 twist, because that was not a non-element, I see that as different. That's, I think, the biggest twist that you as an EP have put out, the most game breaking, if that's fair to say. So what was kind of the perspective on that? Because I know that obviously as you compare it to like the Simon winning immunity in episode 7, which was an all-time high, something that's been globally lauded, that episode, as an episode of television in the New York Times, which is incredible. And this, I think, but this was like even more. This was, 3 people, and it was about, they lost votes. So it was big, and it was certainly a big Sunday night episode. I think most people loved it. I'm sure even the casual audience, that kind of favor was even broader than it. The superfans also, I think, largely enjoyed it. I think I was in a minority of how I felt about that twist, but so how do you kind of look at something like that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, just to address that, I get that your thing is about agency, about votes and taking votes away. I get it, and I there is a purist in me who's like, you should always have a vote at tribal, right? I get that, but then there's a little demon on my shoulder who's like, but maybe you don't. But the what was the question again? How do I view the the big episode?
That's a big near game breaking episode.
It's a game breaking thing, right? Yeah, but it might not have been. This is the thing. Like, we gamble, we roll the dice on those things. If those votes had been won by Charles and Winner and Valeria, then the tribal would have proceeded exactly as usual, So we walked into a happy accident in that it flipped the game, but recognize that the risk is there for us as producers that it may just not. And often in the situation where we do something and it doesn't break the game or it doesn't have any effect, we often just cut it out of the edit, right? So if there is something that happens, like, for example, we cut out the letters from home in the edit this year, which was at the auction. I know a lot of them have posted them online, and that happened. Yeah, it happened, but it didn't result in anything that moved the story forward, apart from everyone having a bit of a tear, which is also a lovely moment, and it's one of my favorite moments. But at that point, there was so much going on in the game that it kind of felt a bit like we don't need it. We've seen it before. There wasn't anything that happened that then resulted in an action that resulted in someone being voted out. So because it was kind of superfluous to story, which we have much, a lot of story, and we're always editing, we're like, okay, well, we can make the choice to cut that out this year. Where with a twist like, or the challenge like in 10, you can't cut that out. You can't cut out a challenge in the middle of tribal and then just still be there after tribal and suddenly 3 people have votes. What the hell? You have to play that out. There's a risk involved in it for us. We're rolling the dice. This is going to be in the show. We've got no control over whether it's not in the show. Here we go. And there's a lot of like, there was so much writing on that challenge. I remember, like, what am I trying to say? The tape measures between where they were standing in the barrels and making sure, like in the grit levels on that everyone's barrel was level, and that happens every challenge, but it was like especially, we were just so on at this challenge because people are going home off the back of it, and it needs to be untouchably fair. Just like this is going to end someone's game, and it needs to be so fair that it can be unimpeachable that it was skewed towards one contestant or another. And so in the end, you just held the fate in your hands. And remember how I leaned. Like, I remember in the control room just being like, and suddenly she's got 3 things on this barrel, and I was like, wow, that girl needed it. She needed it. She knew it, and she needed it, and she delivered. And I think that's why one of the many reasons why the audience loved Eileen is, like, in the moments of the most difficult moments, she rose to the occasion. And then, Kirby just being brilliant at challenges and that kind of stuff generally, and then Ferris just pulled it out. And like that could have totally not happened. And I remember George texting me. He was like, oh, you got lucky there, didn't you? And I was like, yes, we got lucky. We got lucky that, and I'm not lucky for Charles, but we got lucky that we got a twist that then resulted in a change of the game, because odds are that wasn't going to happen. Odds are that of 9 people or 8 people, whoever were voting together, 3 of them, or at least 2 of them, were going to win votes. So, yeah. I mean, there's only so much. And we pray to Survivor gods as the contestants think we're the Survivor gods, but they're not. They're like someone else up there who's looking out for the show being entertaining.
Yeah, how do you balance that? Because in terms of entertainment, I think a lot of people look back as like that was a highlight of the season. As we've said, like that's a Sunday night episode, and there's so much pressure on Australian Survivor and this very difficult TV landscape to get eyes away from Married at First Sight. And how do you kind of balance that of like needing the big moments and like eyes on, but I know that you're someone who cares about like journeys and the stories and like the fact that this is such a compelling long-term like really incredible television, but it also needs that like bite and that kick and those views, and like episode 10 did have something like this. So how do you look at that and balance that kind of broadly with a broad audience?
Well, when I first started working in television, I worked on MasterChef, and I looked after MasterChef for many years. Left that last year, but I worked with Matt Preston, who's a judge, and I was writing on it, like writing the challenges and how the rules and stuff, like just boring words. And he was like, always think of the, and I was like, always think of the promo. So always think about what is that promo going to say for that Sunday night episode, and I'm, how am I going to draw the audience in? The biggest tribal ever, the greatest blindside ever, and that like we work that out after. We're not going into it thinking, you go, what happened? What was the good part? What's the sexy part? How do we sell this? But those Sunday night episodes those twists are often on those big Sunday nights or whatever, because you want to lead up the Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. If you happen to be on Channel 10, you just want to be hearing what the hell is going to happen on Sunday. That's what we're leading towards. So, we don't want to bury it on a Tuesday or a Monday if we can. But also our episode structure is we have 90-minute episodes on air on Sunday, Monday, usually. Well, then we have an amount of 90s and a certain amount of 60s that we can shuffle around, but usually the 60s move toward the end when there's less players and less story and less things happening. So usually the first 3 weeks is all 90s all the time. So that means we have 2 challenges, a reward challenge and an immunity challenge. We have 2 segments of, tribal picks. We have a tribal, we have a vote, we have a segment before the first challenge and a reward segment. And so there's always things we're thinking about what we can populate those things with. And when it comes to twists and big episodes, it's about how do we sell it? How do we, what's the promo going to be? What's the, and that those things help. Those twisty episodes help us to create those moments. But it's also going to result in the game being good. Sometimes the twist will be the least exciting thing about the game. Like, for example, in Heroes v Villains Ep 7, with the Simon winning immunity, like, yes, that is the catalyst for what happened afterwards, but it was like the least exciting part of that episode. The most exciting part of that episode was how it was dealt with. So, it's like the twist itself didn't make the promo. What made the promo was the greatest tribal you'll ever see, which is, and I remember just on that, I remember when we watched that, and I watched it again the other day because my husband was like, what was that tribal where George was doing the thing above his head? I want to put it in my show. I was like, another excuse to watch that tribal again. Let's go. But those kind of things, depending on what is the most exciting thing in that episode, that's what the promo will be. And often it is the twist, but not always it is the twist.
Yeah, I did notice with a lot of the Sunday nights, there was something to look forward to, the swap, the merge, that Tribal Council. It was like event television. So I think that makes sense. I mean, speaking of that, another twist was Raymond's ultimate vote advantage. What was kind of the thinking behind that? And did you think it could go that way in the way that Raymond took it? Or how did you think someone would deal with this? Because as he said, he was like, this isn't a great advantage. Like, how did you think that someone might handle that, and if they'd actually try to play it?
Yeah, so there's a few things around this advantage. One is that, again, what I said earlier is if Raymond chose never to play it, because he didn't have to, it wasn't a beware advantage, he didn't lose his vote or anything like that, we could have just cut it out of the show. So that could have been one of those things that if it had fallen into the hands of a player who was like, absolutely no way, no hell, never, then they just would have eaten the popcorn, they would have gone back to camp, they would have read the advantage, they would have gone, no way, and they would have thrown it in the bin and we would never have seen it. So that's the benefit of an advantage like that. That if it doesn't affect the game, it doesn't have to put it in the retelling of the game. Like, not everything has to make it. But because it was Raymond, and because Raymond is Raymond, he was like, oh God, yes, please, this is going to be fun. So the thought around that was, I wanted to make an advantage that was so incredibly risky, but with that incredible risk came incredible power. So the power and the risk be commensurate. Like, so if you literally one person had decided to throw their vote somewhere else, as they well should have, because it's Survivor, then he would have gone home that night. But he was willing to take that risk because he's, you know, he wants to be remembered. He wants to be an oddball. He just doesn't care. So he was like, great, let's do it. He was almost the perfect person to buy that popcorn. Like, he was the perfect person because a lot of members of that cast, I can't see Ferris doing that. Can't see Kirby doing that. You know, the games are too established, too good, too many fingers in too many pies, whereas Raymond's like, here's a big move. I can do it all on my own. He had the right people who were on his side, and then he got it done. And I was like, that risk was so great that he literally had to get 8 people to vote for him. And he chose I'm going to act like I don't want to be here. But he could have done many things. There could have been many ways he could have played it. He could have he could have pissed everyone off. You know, he could have just been absolutely horrible. He could have actually just told everyone, except for the one person they wanted to vote for. High risk move. But there's so many ways you could have played that advantage. So I'm glad he got it. I'm glad he did it. I'm glad he pulled it off. I didn't think he would, but he did. Yeah. So kudos to him.
Yeah, probably Raymond.
And expect to see it on the American show.
Yeah. Raymond.
Beware.
Yeah, that was the real beware advantage, 100%. I feel like Raymond and maybe Alex, maybe that's the only 2 people of the cast who were like, yeah, I got not a lot to lose. Let's do it. Let's go. Yeah. So
a lot of love for Alex. I think Alex is one of the kind of, I mean, you know, we wanted someone who was going to be carefree. And I think that Alex was that person. But Alex was very, very insightful. Whenever the chips were down, he really saw through the matrix of the game. And then who was playing with who and how. But what he just couldn't do is capitalize. He couldn't use that knowledge to his advantage and collate a group of people that wanted to work with him. You know, he always ended up being a number for someone else. And that's a shame because he really, really could see the game and see who was working with who. He just couldn't weaponize it. Kirby or Ferris could.
So the reason everyone's here, let's talk about it. Application advice. Help the people, because I've been talking to a lot of players in deep dives, and like Eileen said that she ran into you, and I'm like spoiling the deep dive now, but recognized you by voice. Mark, also the stalking that these potential applicants will do of you and the way they are listening to this right now. Hi everyone, hi potential applicants.
Everyone.
It's immense. So tell the people, give them a little something of what they should be doing as an applicant.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really hard to tell someone how to be themselves. I think I really just want people who are unafraid to be themselves. There's no part of you that. So I'm not going to judge you, and this is, you know, one of my personal qualities and one of my professional qualities is there's no part of you or who you can be that I'm going to judge. You could have been in jail for 10 years. You could have done some horrible things in your past. You know, I'm not here to judge you, jury, and executioner. What I am here to do is understand you. And if I understand you and find you intriguing, interesting, different, that I'm a conduit for the audience, right? I'm looking at you like an audience is looking at you. And what I love about the Heroes v Villains cast, the Titans v Rebels cast, is I think they were all just such interesting people. You know, all of them, every single one of them. Even, I mean, Frankie was my winner pick. That's how bad I am at picking winners on the show.
That's an embarrassing thing to admit.
But I was like, there's so much. I know. As the EP, I picked the person who went out first. But she was, and I'm using her as an example because she went out first and you didn't get to sing to her. But there was so much interesting about that woman that I was like, oh my God, the audience is just going to get to love this woman or hate her. I don't know, but there's so much there. Same with Kelly. You know, like I remember Kelly came into the audition and like Hurricane Rebel Kel, she was the last person in this day in Brisbane, and we were like, so we'd seen about 30 people that day, you know, one-on-one interviews. She comes in and she just was like, right, and she just talked for 20 minutes, and me and everyone else there would say a single word, and she walked out, and I was like, what the hell just happened? you know. And then initially my thought was like, never, no way, not in a million years. But then when I watched her cut down version, I was like, oh my God, you're so entertaining. Like, I didn't want to be in with you, but I wanted to watch you. And that is the difference. If you can work out how you're going to be seen by an audience, like, and don't tell me how you're going to be seen. No, the audience is going to love me. I'm like, well, just be lovable, you know, be who you are. Don't say who you are, be who you are, with all your quirks, with all your foibles, with all your achievements, you know, big note yourself. Tell me why you're great. And this is one thing we really struggle to do because Australians are quite humble. It's like stories, particularly the Titans. I'm like, you're a fucking Titan. Tell me why you run the world. Like, tell me. Be that. Be the yourself, you know, like that. And if you know who you are and you know how you come across, not only are you imminently watchable, but you're also going to be great in the game. You're going to be great in the game because you know who you are and you know how you come across, so you can manage that when you're dealing with other players. So I want people generally, I don't want tall people, short people, fat people, skinny people. I'm not casting you on your body type or how you look or where you're from. I'm casting you on who the core of you is. Now, a lot of people don't know that about themselves. A lot of people find that out on the island sometimes. But I want to cast someone who the audience is going to find something in you that makes you interesting. The person at the party I want to have a longer conversation with, even though my friend wants to go. The person at the party who I find intriguing over in the corner, just them, and I don't know why. That's who I want in my cast. I want a cast of interesting, amazing people. And that comes in all its forms. It doesn't have to, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You don't have to be a gold medal winner. You can be interesting and amazing just because of your life experiences. You can be interesting and amazing because of what's happened to you as a child or a teenager, or the choices you've made, or the relationships you've had or ended or started or been through, the people you've met. Like, tell me interesting and amazing stories that the audience is going to listen to about you, rather than just go, oh God, this boring person. I've seen them all before on every other show I've always seen. You know, on Survivor, we have this, as you've mentioned, this incredible opportunity to tell long-form stories. I need the audience to be interested in you on day one, and then on day 47, they're like, I never knew that about. Caroline is a great example of this for me. Caroline, to look at her, is a mid-50s, midwife from Melbourne, right? How many of them are there? Probably 10,000. I don't know. But she had this incredible desire and passion for the game. That's unusual for someone of that age group. She had this unwavering confidence, which was like, I am going to get on this show. Just believe me, I'm going to get on this show. And I was like, that's unusual for someone in that age group. I believe people in that age group would be like, well, maybe you have me, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, well, all right, if you believe it. And then she had this unbelievable potty mouth. She fucked her way through the interview, like, fuck, shit, you know, like, and I was like, I like that about you. You are confident and you're interesting, and you, even though we'll never show the show, it's a family show, like that to me speaks to your personality. And so what to look at a, you know, middle class, white, 55-year-old midwife from Melbourne has so much more to her than what is. So I'm like, by the time we get to day 47, there's going to be more to Caroline than we thought on day one. And that is exactly what happened. And so it's same with Ferris, you know, like he's the, you know, you think he's just going to be this dude from Western Sydney, and it's certainly the role he plays, but then he is smart as hell. He is savvy. He's funny. He can interact with all people while still being true to his values. You know, he had real issues with the sleeping arrangements, obviously, because he's a devout Muslim man who's married, and he doesn't, you know, touch other women. He doesn't want to spoon like everyone on Survivor does, and he never did. And that's power to him. Like, he played in the game within his set of values, and that was something that was true to him. And yet he could still be a surprising version of a young Arab Muslim man from Western Sydney. So I want you to invert a stereotype. That's what I want, basically. Work out who you appear to be, and then tell you're more than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Ferris, we saw...
Is that a good example?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, with Ferris, we saw that pay off immediately because I think pre-season and going into the season, I felt like the cool kids of the Rebels, I could see that forming. And it did, but it formed as a minority.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons for that was Ferris, because I felt like Ferris so much would be a kind of a bro, probably with the Alexes and Tobiases, and he would lay a number to that. If anything, he led the Misfits against that group because he was surprising. And he actually wanted to be with the oddballs, and he wanted to be with the Raymonds, the Garricks, and the Eileens. And that's where he saw his power and his comfort. And I think that is surprising and showed that's a layered, different human being, someone who will surprise you, and he did from the jump.
And that's it. Like, Ferris is an outsider. Like, he presents like he's you know, like he's the kind of one of the club, or that, you know, he's fit and he's good looking and he's kind of, you know, he presents like he's the popular kid, but actually he's the nerd at school. And that's another thing he kind of brought to his interview as well. He was sort of like, I'm, you know, people think I'm one thing, but I'm not. And that's important in the game. It played out in his gameplay, because you're right. He chose the misfits and the nerds over the popular cool kids. And then that basically defined that tribe. And, you know, that doesn't mean to say that popular cool kids can't be great players too, and they can't also form a great alliance and invert their own stereotype. But I'm just saying that if you appear to be one thing and then there's layers like an onion to you, that manna from heaven. That is, be more than just the one thing. Or if you are the one thing, be it to its extreme. You know, and I defend Kelly, Rebel Kel, because I'm like, she is a lot smarter than she appears, and she played this kind of crazy character because it is her. She is that. She's crazy, right? She does explain her interview. But on our one-on-one chats, you know, during the interview process, you know, she's like, I'm much more than that, and I know you know that, and I know that you know that. And I was like, great, good, because I know that this is going to get old quick. And I'd say that to her. I'd be like, dude, you do this, you be you. In the first 2 days, you're going to go home. You need to be more than that. And she's like, I get it. I will be. I am. I'm like, great. So you need to, like, I don't just want to see a version of a game bot who knows every move that's ever happened in Survivor. I want that person to also be really funny and interesting, or really physical, really like worried that they're going to go home first. Like, what is it that, show me your vulnerability, show me your strength, show me everything. That's the weird part, minutes, you know, in the interview I have with you. And some people just shit the bed. Like, I've had good chats with people who came to the auditions last year who just shit the bed. You know, they're great people and have been great cast members, but their audition was terrible because they were either so nervous because they listened to these podcasts and were, you know, met me and or met the crew and people behind a desk, and everyone just being like, why would you be good on Survivor? And they're just like, oh, you know, waiting weeks and weeks and weeks for this audition, and then just shit the bed. But other people, I'm just like, I need to find something that the audience is going to like about you. I want to cast 24 winners. I want to cast 24 people that could win this game, and we can provide a winner's edit for, and the audience goes, yes, I'm so glad they won. That's who I want. If you're not that person, and if you're no one I can make that story about, then I'm probably going to cast you, basically.
Yeah, I think we see that across the board in Titans v Rebels and the way that was cast. Even like, you know, you say, you know, someone like cool kids can still be good casting. Yeah, like no one would say Alex wasn't cool, but he was layered and different, and he ended up kind of being a different version of the cool kid than we would have thought. And then someone like Nathan, when you're like, if you're not going to surprise me, can we tell a story where you're at that extreme? And Nathan was like such a perfect TV character that I feel like he makes that premiere alone. Like, he built up so much as this one archetype that his downfall within 90 minutes, I was like, I didn't know you 90 minutes ago, but right now I'm so invested in this. And he like went into that to extremes, which is incredible.
He just, like, for a moment, he tried to make that fire on the day one. I was just like, dude, you are, well, you know, you, and he just kept, that is Nathan. You're like, Nathan is that guy, like, fuck it, I'm just going to do, like, he is so gung-ho that, and damn the torpedoes, he doesn't care the destruction that leaves in his wake. And he's good looking, and he's charming, and he's fit, like, and he's young. It's like, it hasn't had much impact, or the impact it's had, he's been like, who cares? I'll get the next job, get the next girl, get the next job, the next opportunity, whatever. So that is interesting. How's that going to go in Survivor? You know, sometimes people don't realize why they're going to be good on the show. And that's probably half the cast don't realize why they'd be good on the show. You know, Kitty was one of those who came in and she was like, I can't lie. And I was like, okay, well, that's going to be good on the show. You know, So and then she learned to, and that's also good. That provided some more story. So at the end of the day, I just really, really want to be in touch with who you are, and I really want you to be proud of showing that on television, because we're going to see all parts of you. We're going to see you at your best. We're going to see you at your worst. We're going to see you at your ugliest. We're going to see you at your, most beautiful in the promo shots. So I just want to see, I don't want you to be ashamed of who you are, because shame is going to make you retreat into yourself. It's going to make you be conservative. It's going to make you not believe in yourself when you're playing game. And I can't, the hardest thing with Survivor is you can't test what we're about to do. And a singing show, it's like, cool, and you sing, it's okay, you're not going to be very good, don't. Or you're amazing, come on the show. Survivor, it's not like, all right, get out there, starve yourself for 5 days and sleep on the ground, and then we'll see who's going to be good. We can't do that. So we have to look beyond that. I have to see you, or our casting team needs to see you at your extreme in that weird moment when you've had a full night's sleep and a full breakfast, and you've come along, you've had 2 coffees and, I don't know, a line of cocaine, I don't know what you've done, to walk into that room. I need to see beyond that to you 5 days in, hungry, tired, no cigarettes, no alcohol, no chocolate, no sugar, all of those things taken away. You still need to be up for the game, and that's the hardest part, because some people just crumble, and we can't ever cut that completely out. Like, there are just some people, like Scott. I want to talk about Scott, because he was one of our A++, brilliant, has to be on the show people. He walked in, he told his story. It was amazing. He was interesting. He was different. He inverted stereotypes. He was a total rebel. I was like, right, you're on the show. You're amazing. And then it got out there. His mental health battle began in a way that he didn't expect. Brought up a lot of stuff for him from his past. He was, he didn't have the support around him that he usually has. He didn't have his tools, like his art, that is usually quite therapeutic for him. And so all of these things that I didn't expect and he didn't expect would affect him just suddenly did, and that had a cumulative effect. And then it emerged, that feeling of like, oh my God, I have to go through it all again. It's all about to start again. I thought I was getting halfway through, but I'm actually at the start. That just hit him like a freight train, and he just couldn't continue. Now that we can't plan for that. We can't solve that. We can't that. So, the Scott story is hard to avoid. There'll always be someone on the island who just goes, what the hell have I signed up for? And that's tough, but that's the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that was handled well by the show, and obviously given the resources after as well was important. I've got a couple of things I want to talk to you about before we go. I know that you know my podcast is so long, and I'm trying not to lean into the stereotype, but okay. I've
got 30 minutes.
Okay, no, we'll get done. But this is the cheeky question, and this is what I really want to ask, because I feel like the debate rages on: heroes versus villains versus titans versus rebels. Which season is better in these two historic seasons? Now you're the creator; these are your children. I want you to pick a child and tell me why. Which of these seasons do you think is better?
Okay. Can we segue to when or if Titans v Rebels wins a Logie and or actor? Sorry, because we didn't win the actor for Heroes versus Villains. I'm very sad about it, even though I personally won for the season of MasterChef and beat it. I was rooting for Survivor. Well, that was a brilliant season. Having said that, I think that there's two things can be true at once. Heroes versus Villains had higher highs and lower lows for me. Ep 7 Tribal, I think, will probably be the greatest piece of television I ever have been involved in. I think it was perfect in every way. No notes. Having said that, I think Titans versus Rebels has a richer and more complex cast that plays deeper and longer. And so, whereas Heroes v Villains was dominated by huge players, and it was an epic battle of those players, I think Titans v Rebels was a more even playing field and a richer game. So I think that for me, I'm not going to pick a favorite, but I am going to say I value them both. So I'm in the final two now, am I?
Yeah.
I'm in the final two. Fuck, who am I voting for?
Pick a child.
I think, honestly, and don't hate me, cast of this season, but I am voting for Titans versus Rebels because I think it played a more satisfying TV experience than the unbelievable sugar hits and highs of Heroes v Villains. And can I say, I'm really glad that Titans v Rebels was so warmly received, because I was very worried about it being a new theme and a cast of newbies. We all were like that. How could we possibly follow up what was at that point regarded as one of the best seasons of Australian Survivor, if not global Survivor? And so then how do we follow that up with a totally new thing? And my big feeling for the whole season was it has to be a complete left turn. It has to be a complete, like, it's not the Villains 2. It has to be a completely something new that you're not expecting. New characters, new people to discover, new everything. As new as you can be in the world of Survivor. So I'm glad we were able to achieve that and then have it warmly received. And I'm so grateful to the cast for being the best versions of themselves on that island. And I've learned a lot about getting a cast ready for the show. And that's if I can leave one thing to producers of this show after me, or who might be listening and produce other shows, is I'm like, get your cast ready for the show. Nothing is greater than a cast that is switched on, ready, wanting to play and knowing how to play in their own weird way. Because a lot of producers are like, I'm going to restrict information to amp up the confusion or amp up the drama or amp up the, oh my God, look at them, fish out of water. Whereas I'm like, they're going to be fish out of water of what you tell them. You can tell them every piece of information in the Survivor handbook and they are still going to be fish out of water. So I'd rather tell them every piece of information, get the fish out of water, but have them ready and prepared to go from day one, hell for leather. And I hope that season 10, if it's me or someone else, able to continue that tradition of amazing. And when everyone's playing the game at that level, then their personalities can come out better rather than people steamrolled by people who are playing a game at a much higher level than the rest of the cast. So I want the cast to each have a foot in the door, ability to play the game. And then those that smash it open are the ones that smash it open, but at least everyone had a chance. Everyone's ready. And then once you put them, let's go. I want them so raring to go by the time that, lockdown ends and they actually step foot on day one and meet Jonathan and do the challenge. And they're just like over the top excited and ready. And they don't feel confused and they don't feel scared and they don't feel afraid, which is useful television on other shows. But I think Survivor's moved beyond that. I think Survivor is now about, we just want to see people be brilliant and be themselves in these conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I actually remember before the season, George said to me, he's like, I've heard the season is better than Heroes versus Villains. I was like, in my usual combative with George, where I was like, that's impossible, George. I think I actually said, I was like, if that is true, this would be the best 2 seasons in a row that ever happened. And I'm like, it's just not physically, and then it literally, so I apologize to George because, it's just like, not like, you can't have 2 top 5 seasons in a row and it's going to happen, which is incredible.
Well, wait, hold your breath because it'll be a third. Let's make it a third.
I love it.
Let's make it the perfect trio. But the thing is, it's got to be, to invoke it's got to be the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. They've all got to have their own role in this version, in this triangle. Like, they can't all do the same thing. They've got to have. So, but I'm confident, and this is maybe I think my greatest strength is I'm confident that whatever we get handed in terms of a cast, whatever we decide on as a theme, we can use, we will find the story. As long as the cast is good, we will find the story. The story will write itself. I don't need to write a story for you. I don't need to twist it up or save people or protect people or do all those things that they do on other shows, because cast is so strong, there ain't no way you can screw it up. Like, they will screw it up for you, and they'll make it brilliant, and they'll make it amazing, and they'll make it terrible. And you can just, then all you have to do is like flying a kite, right? You just got to find the wind. You're not providing the wind. You're not the kite. The cast is the kite. You're just like, oh, I'll get a bit there and I'll swoop a bit there. And that's what producing should be, particularly reality TV. It's like they're doing the job. You're just like, oh, maybe a bit there, oh, a bit that way, a bit that way. And then you get this incredible game. It doesn't have, but when you get when you have a bad cast, you have to do more work as a producer to make them better, to make the show more interesting, because they're not doing the work. And if the majority of your cast is poor, I would say the perfect Survivor cast is everyone is a 10 out of 10. But the reality is you're probably going to get about 3 or 4 10 out of 10s. You're going to get about 4, 6 9s. You're going to get a whole bunch of 8s, and then you get the odd 6, 5, 2, and 1. And you can't get a perfect score of 10 out of 10. But if you can just have the majority of them above an 8, it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned the future, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, is how are we looking towards the third, as you're saying, a third child to choose between, hopefully in a year, when I'm like, can you pick between the 3? And then we're going to have a final 3 where there's no goats. So, yeah, how are we looking towards that?
I mean, I think it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard. Like, I kind of want to, we're going to, if I keep saying if, because, I haven't officially signed the document yet. But if we go and cast again, I kind of want to let the cast decide the theme in a way. There's ideas banging around, there's plans. But, when you meet the cast and they're all kind of this, that, or the other, you kind of, make it work. And Titans v Rebels, although not a direct dichotomy and was a questionable theme for a lot of people, I think played out quite well, because you sort of want, I think the themes work really well for us because it's something we can market. But it's also, they work well because it allows people to have a little beacon to play their game like, play a game like a Titan, you're just going to roll your way through it, or play a game like a Rebel, play a game Brains or Brawn. This is where I think Blood v Water struggled, the only one I didn't do. But I think it's also where Blood v Water as a concept is slightly flawed, because you're playing with some, and your game is affected by the outcomes that they have, and it's kind of hamstrings you a bit. But then, I think Champions v Contenders, which is sort of the same thing as Titans v Rebels, and if you want to slice it that way, underdog, top dog kind of works for us, someone who's there and someone who youth versus experience. Millennials Gen X was a great season. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity with the theme to provide context for the season. But I think at the end of the day, the players have to dictate that. And I would rather cast the theme around the players than cast the players around him, if that makes sense. I think the cast in anything is the most important thing you do. So if we're getting a lot of brilliant, young people and a lot of brilliant older people, then maybe it's a generational thing. But if we get a lot of brilliant, city people and brilliant country people, then maybe it's a city v country theme. I don't know. So I'm not going to say what the theme is, because I don't know, because I want to let them decide in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that adaptability is really good. And as you're saying, it's something you're kind of open in general in terms of like final 2 and final 3. And as we're saying, like those kind of stories leading the way in casting. I think that is an incredible thing. Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy with where Australian Survivor is with you, hopefully at the helm for a very, very long time. I think that the product speaks for itself. Hopefully the season wins all the awards, because honestly, like, I didn't watch any of the other shows, but I can't imagine they were better than this. Like, I truly can't imagine it. So yeah, I mean, it just has been an amazing couple of years of Australian Survivor. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the audience about anything at all?
I just want to, first of all, I want to also be a bit effusive and say thank you for all the praise, and I feel it, and I feel supported in my role to, run with it. But there is such an incredible team behind the whole show. Particularly, there's been a core team of creatives, and I'll name them as me, co-EP Maria Handis, series producer, now co-EP Phoebe McMahon, and the game producer Lauren Anderson. All brilliant. All women, all brilliant. And they're the core creative team that has been behind these last 2 seasons with me, and they are unbelievable at what they do, every single one of them. The story team who are out there in the rain, and there's been many, many members of the story team over the years. And on top of that, just the crew in general. Those camos, just the stuff that they do, that they have, when they're is unbelievable. And yes, they get paid and yes, it's a great job and you get to, but it's really fucking hard. And so I just want to shout out, and of course all the post team as well. I want to shout out to all the crew who make the show. I can sit here on this podcast and take the kudos from you, and I gratefully do, but it's really not just me. It's not even close to just being me. And also the people above me. Amelia Fisk, who's my direct boss, Pete Newman, who was a visionary who kind of signed the show up to the SA and sold it to 10. So, and also the 10 people. Like there's just so much that goes into this, but the core team that is working on it now is what it is. And that's me, and it's all the people around me. And so it's so great. The other thing I want to say is I hope that I hope and I'm glad that the audience loves it. And I love that the international audience loves it as well, because I truly believe that stories are universal. And yes, we're playing as Australians, and yes, it's an Australian game and there's some cultural, idiosyncrasies and whatever. But, we're people, and we're having people style problems that all people have everywhere. It's about loyalty and betrayal and trust and friendship and respect. These are universal themes. And so I hope that it can grow its international audience. I hope that we continue to rise in the US and North and beyond. I think that, and Europe, and I think that there is a real scope for this Australian Survivor to have a global audience, as well as an Australian audience. And you and I, you've been the greatest proponent of the battle we face up against Married at First Sight and that. But I'm happy to take that battle on. I think that we're a quality alternative to other shows that are out there. I think that we are now. I want you to be able to turn on a Australian Survivor and know you're going to get a great adventure. That's what the legacy that I want to create for this version of the show is like. I'm going to watch Australian Survivor. I'm excited about it coming. I can't wait to see the stories and these people I'm going to meet and the stories and the journey they're going to go on. And whatever happens, I know it's going to be great. That's what I want from Australian Survivor. And not this kind of like, oh, I hope it's a good season. Oh, that kind of like, oh, am I really watching this season? No, I can't be bothered. I want it to be every season be great. The point where, and it's really interesting watching what's happening in the US with a lot of people who were longtime fans of the show, and there it happened, and they made a very, very deliberate choice to be something different to what they were before. And that choice has then had, implications on the way the fans have viewed the show. I'm not here to judge it, but what I'm here to say is I want our show to be the show that everyone always looks forward to and wants to see the next season, like the American season has been for many years. The American season is this like appointment for the fandom of Survivor, and here comes the new season, and what are we going to think about this one? I want Australia to join it and be like, okay, now it's time for Australian Survivor. What are we going to get this season? How good is it going to be? Wait, and hopefully they'll just keep being great versions of themselves.
I think you did that. I think it's done. I think that's already been achieved. So
ongoing battle, Shannon. It's ongoing. It's never ending.
That's true. I guess you're only as great as your last season. So there's always, I guess, room to fumble the ball. But where it is right now, Australian Survivor is more than appointment viewing. It's the darling of the global Survivor community. You can't tweet about US Survivor without people responding about how much better Australian Survivor is right now. So look, little brother is getting it done against the OG, I think, a little bit at the moment, and that scope is being managed incredibly well, as I've said. So I'm so impressed with you and the team for what you've achieved, and it's just a joy. And I think that what you say about it being an adventure, that is how it feels. Actually, the last few seasons have felt like that. It's the journey, where are we going? And we're going to go places, and it's going to be 47 days. We've watched 94 combined days across what you've been at the helm of, and boy, have we traveled, and we've gone places, and it's been incredibly fun. So yeah, I think that you all should be so incredibly proud of it, and good luck with the next season. And I hope that you're in charge of it, and I hope that it's even anywhere close to what these two seasons have brought, because they have been truly phenomenal television, and they should win awards, and they 100% should win all the. I'm not biased. I really believe they should win the awards.
Thank you, Shannon. And look, honestly, thank you personally for being such an advocate for the show. And I think, your voice is very respected in this community, and your knowledge is very respected. And when you are so vehemently promoting it because you believe in it, people believe you because you're genuine. And I think that is a very lovely thing to have in our corner. It feels very humbling to me to have people of your stature in the community love it the way that it is, because that means we're doing something right. And so keep on loving it. And when you start hating it, don't call me.
100%. Well, look, I know that the way you view the game, it's something that I have a lot of respect for, and it comes from a place of extreme thoughtfulness. And that's something that is very important to me when I'm looking at how something's being created, is that, there's someone who puts a lot of thought into things. I love the way that you think about it so comprehensively. And look, I'm thrilled with the place that the game is at, and I have high hopes for the future. But I was going to say, where can people find you? But I don't know that they should, because having spoken to some of the contestants who've been a little too forthright about finding the casting agent, maybe we leave DF alone, apply for the show, be a part of the next great phase. That's it.
Yeah. Honestly, casting is open. Going like the more cast we have, the more applicants we have to choose from, the better. The casting team is brilliant. Mike Searle, who is the head of the casting team, is currently, I think, Australia's best producer. He won some award. He's brilliant. He sees through a lot of the casting videos in the way that, he does all the sifting, and he and his team of Nicole and whoever else is on that team these days, they are brilliant, because they by the time they get to me, and a lot of people will be like, I applied, and by the time they get to me, it's like a very, very cut down version. So I'm not sitting there going through every application, or 4,000 of them, 9,000. I don't even know how many we have. So by the time it gets to me, you've already kind of won. And Mike, his whole job is casting, and he's very, very good at it. He is the one who will be deciding on whether you get to me. And if you do get to me, then, as Raymond said, this is what he said in his interview. He's like, well, there's 24 million people in Australia, and there's 24 people in the cast. So if I get on, I'm one in a million, right? I was like, yeah, that's kind of true. But that if you get to the point where we're meeting and you're hassling me, then you're already a long way down the road. So, but people will seek me out and find me. That's fine. That's cool. I'm not saying if you join me as a friend on Instagram, I'm going to cast you on the show. That's not how it works. But I just want people. I like with Eileen and like with Eden and Caroline. I want fans to live their dream. If they're right and the show's right and they're in the right spot and everything's, in our professional opinion is good for them right now, why not let them live their fucking dream? Because they're going to want to relish it. And that doesn't mean everyone's going to be a fan. But if you're a fan and you listen to this, watch, every deep dive, and listen to every deep dive, and you just want to get involved and you want to see how you go out there, that's not a bad thing. It's not, but it's also not the only thing. I could cast superfans in about 20 seconds. We could have a cast of superfans ready to go. It's more than that. You've got to be more than just you're the guy at the Survivor Trivia Night who knows every answer. You've also got to be a person that the audience wants to watch. Just remember that.
Yeah, amazing advice. Well, thank you so much. This has been invaluable for what people who watch the show, for some behind the scenes insights, people who want to be on the show, anyone who's interested in the show. It's honestly been amazing to have you on the podcast. For me personally, the deep dives are continuing on. And by the time the deep dives are done, I promise every person who listens will feel like they were on that season. Okay. We're going to feel like we're going to really be in it. So just keep an eye out for that. Subscribe to the International Survivor RHAPups feed so you don't miss any of this content. But DF, thank you so, so much. Again, it's really been an honor to chat to you, and I'm really appreciative of you coming onto the podcast.
My pleasure, Shannon. Thank you for asking me. Glad to have me. And let's come back after season 10 and talk about how it was better than season 8 and 9 combined.
Yeah, I can't wait. And when George says that to me, I'm not going to doubt him anymore. I'm done being a disbeliever. It seems impossible, but you made the impossible happen. So I'm a believer now. But thank you so much, David. Thank you to everyone for listening. Thank you to our team behind the scenes. And I will see you next time. Bye.